Hey gang, this is Professor Roth. Welcome to Biology 1, Science Biology and the Scientific Method. This will be the first set of notes for Unit 1. And so whenever we talk about science, biology, and the scientific method, it's important to note kind of like some overarching concepts and some bigger pictures to kind of help us get into the spirit of things. So here's a nice little quote. I don't think you have this on your notes, but that's okay. The problem in society is not kids not knowing science. The problem is that adults don't know science. And why is that so bad? Well, they outnumber kids 5 to 1. They wield power. They even write legislation, and many of them do so, and they don't have any scientific literacy. Um, Whenever you have scientific illiterate adults, you have undermined the very fabric of what makes a nation wealthy and strong, because what makes us wealthy and strong is our ability to critically evaluate the quality of a statement before we accept it. And if you have people that are scientifically illiterate, they tend to accept whatever they're told without questioning it, without evaluating it to see if the information is accurate, makes sense, or is even true. And so that's Neil deGrasse Tyson, and if you've probably seen him before on some Discovery Channel information on science channels. He's done some stuff with Bill Nye. He single-handedly saved NASA from going under. He's a great guy, very smart. He's very well known for being able to take a statement that is a concept that is large and put it in small, easy to understand terms, and that's one of the reasons I like him so much. So let's get started in the unit. So the secret of life on Earth. So most of us know that biology is the study of science, the scientific study of life. So that's a easy concept. We already know that. But essentially, within the scope of biology, we are constantly discovering new species, even today. Now, we don't discover a lot of big things because they're already really, well, we found them. They're big. It's easy to see and easy to find. But we discover small things all the time, like this little guy. I mean, what is going on here? He's got like a paintbrush coming out of his rear end. Hey, look at brightly colored. It's really an interesting little creature. And what about this guy over here? It's poison arrow frog. Its entire species is limited to one pond in Central America, and its entire population. It works fine for them, but that's it. It's the only place they're found. So that may have been taking some time. It was a little hard to discover. But one of the things that we also notice is that there's a thing called extinction rates, and it is accelerating. And how do we know that? Well, what we can do is you can see like over here, animals die. And these are all big cats that were put on a reserve in Texas, probably ex-circus animals or even some ex-pets that could not really, that had to be taken care of. And in this particular case, the owners of the facility passed away in a car accident, and no one knew what to do with the animals that were left behind, so they literally just killed them. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my, I know. But the tigers in this shot, I mean, the tigers are extremely rare in the wild because we've gotten rid of all their habitat. We've hunted them because we perceive them as a threat. The same thing with lions. So what happens when we kill too many? Well, they start to go extinct. They can't reproduce as readily. The species becomes exceedingly rare, and that rate is growing. So how do we know it's growing? Well, there's this thing called the background extinction rate, and what it is, we can look through the fossil record, and we can look at the number of species that are in certain periods of times and see how many of them are there, how often do they appear, and you know, do we still see them today, and whatnot. And we kind of get an idea of what the rate of extinction has been, and we're actually about 100 times higher than today than we are against the background extinction rate. A lot of that includes plants, not just animals, and other small things like insects. If you go to the like medical places, like pharmaceutical companies and medical companies, whenever they are looking for new cures to cancer or new medicines or compounds to work with, they'll send expeditions out, and usually into Central America and South America. And they're going through the rainforest because of all the biodiversity that's there. There's a lot more plants available, and maybe some of those plants have chemicals in them that could help cure cancer. And the problem with that is that that area is also being highly cultivated for its land, and it's being deforested. And those plants and animals are very quickly being wiped off the planet, lots of them before we have time to even really categorize them and understand them and discover them, we're losing them. So there goes some potential cures to some cancer. So yeah, we're constantly discovering new things, but we're also losing things. So life is more than just the sum of its parts. Okay, so the building blocks of all life, or even life and non-life actually, are atoms, right? And they always say, don't believe Adam, he makes up everything, right? But is the building blocks of everything. But they also make up all the non-living things, just like they do the living things. So you're made up of the same elements that make up the non-living things. There's this concept in biology called emergent properties, and essentially what it's saying is that if you have two atoms, they act a certain way. But when you hook those two atoms together to make a molecule, the molecule has properties that the atoms by themselves did not. When you hook the molecules together into like something like one of the biomolecules, well, there's properties there that didn't exist in a simple molecule. And when you put a bunch of molecules together and you form something like a cell has properties the molecules themselves did not. So each level we go up, we start seeing these emergent properties. In psychology, there's this term 2 plus 2 equals 5. Mathematically, that's wrong. 2 plus 2 should be 4. But 2 plus 2 equals 5 is saying you're just greater than the sums of your parts. And they're referring to that emergent property. And if any of you watch anime, there's a great anime called Full Metal Alchemist where they talk about emergent properties. It's one of the core concepts in that show, that an equal exchange. You can't get something for nothing. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, definitely go check it out. It's a great anime. But with that being said, 90% of your body mass is in fact stardust because all the elements except for hydrogen and helium are created within stars. And that's because in order to take two hydrogens and push them together into a helium, and then take two heliums, or helium and a hydrogen and push it together to make lithium, and then take a lithium and a hydrogen and push it together to make beryllium, and so forth and so on, all the periodic table, it takes a lot of heat and a lot of pressure, and the only place we can find that are inside of stars. So it works all the way up to like the 25th element. But element number 26, as soon as it starts to made, and 26 is iron, the same thing that's in your frying pans, iron kills fusion reactions completely. So how do you make everything above 26 on the periodic table? There's 118 elements. How do you make the rest of them if a star, the biggest furnace we know of, can only get up to 26? Well, in the instant the star dies, when the iron is being made, it's supernovas. And in the flash of the supernova, there's way more energy and way more pressure and way more heat that's being released all at once, and that creates every other element on the periodic table. And so, you know, when we look out into space, we're looking at our own origins because we really are true children of the stars. There's more in us than just the first 26, 25, 26 elements. And so a lot of what we are made of atom-wise was built in stars. So with that in mind, here's an old picture of me. I look great. Awesome. All right, so we know that life is organized. It's not randomly chaotic. There's levels of organization to it. I focus on these big four over here, and it's simply that atoms hook together to form molecules. Those molecules, simple or complex, generally hook together and form something like a cell. And of course, a cell is the fundamental unit of life, right? Everything that's alive is either one cell or more. And yes, cells forms tissues, which forms organ systems, but you can't have tissue living by itself or organ living by itself or just an organ system over there chilling in the corner. No, you got to put those together to have an organism. So I simply go from cell to organism. But beyond that, we see that organisms interact. If they're all the same species interacting, just one species, that's a population. But if you look out, here's an example of an organism. Here's one flower. All right, or one plant. It's got multiple flowers on it. But here's all the different individual plants of the same species in a field. That would be a population. If you go to the next step, you're seeing there's more than just one species of flower out there, right? There's all different types, and grasses, and even animals, and insects, and other things that are alive that are in here. And that would be a community. That's multiple species all living in the same area and interacting. So population, just one species. Community is multiple species. But when you look at all this stuff, you start to study, hey, well, what about the air temperature and the pH of the soil and the amount of rainfall and the wind velocity and all these other non-living things that definitely affect life? When you take that into consideration, you're starting to study the ecosystems, the living and the non-living things. And then when you take different ecosystems like temperate deciduous rainforest where we live, or a desert, or a tundra, or a plain, and you start looking at them in a larger picture and how they affect each other, that's when you're studying the biosphere, right? And that's something like the entire planet. So atoms, molecules, cells, organisms form of one species or a population. Multiple different species is a community. The living and the non-living is the ecosystem, and then all of the different ecosystems are the biosphere. So that's how life is organized in a very fundamental way.